So to the top left-hand quadrant of this 2x2 is the resume category. Business leaders in this category must accept their fate and realize that there is little that they can do to turn a bad year into a good one. It's not their fault that their customers stopped coming. The government forced them to shut their doors. And most businesses in this quadrant can't deliver their offerings remotely or come up with some type of meaningful workaround. For example, hair salons, chiropractors, veterinarians, home maintenance companies, live event service providers. The best that these businesses can hope for is to resume operations at some yet to be determined future date, and then they can pick up where they left off. Fortunately, most people are looking forward to consuming these services again, so they will remain a valued part of our everyday life. Unfortunately, consumers aren't going to get twice as many haircuts to make up for the ones that they missed in the spring. Same with massages or lawn service or sporting events. Once we're allowed to congregate again as a society, resume companies can really only hope to return to some semblance of business as usual. Now, lots has been written lately about the importance of continuing to advertise in order to maintain your share of voice. But weirdly enough, these articles all seem to be coming from people within the advertising industry, people who have a vested interest in your media spend. You know, share of voice and maintaining it is really a relative thing. So if your competitors have gone quiet, nothing bad will happen if you do too. Conversely, if they are now dialing up their marketing, hoping to steal your share, then you'd be wise to do the same. Personally, I'm advising my clients who are in the resume quadrant to play defense and to scale back. Their short-term survival is much more closely associated with their access to capital than to ad campaigns. Let me give you an example. Gold's Gym just filed for bankruptcy. They didn't need more marketing, they needed more money. Their fate was largely decided before Corona-19 based on the health of their balance sheet leading into this mess. One other factor affecting businesses in the resume quadrant would be how quickly can the company jolt back to life when all of these stay-at-home orders are lifted. Can they get their people working again? Can they get their operations, their factories or warehouses cranked back up again? And how well can they convince their customers that it's safe to return? Now is the time to get super prepared for when your doors are allowed to open. And that brings me to the next group in the top right-hand quadrant, a group that we call Recoup. COVID-19 curtailed a lot of spending for a few months. And while no one knows how protracted or how profound this recession will be, some industries can reasonably expect to recoup some of the lost Q2 sales. So for example, people who needed a new car a few months ago still want or need a new car. They continue to go online and research what options are available. The same is true for people who needed eyeglasses or for people who needed new clothes, particularly those of us that have gained or lost weight these past few months. So some industries should expect to get not only their normal Q3 and Q4 sales, but they can get a nice bump from the suppressed sales in Q1 or Q2. In fact, most of the discretionary expenditures that I can think of, everything from new appliances to elective medical procedures, could all really come roaring back in a big way. My team and I have studied how well cult brands have fared through previous recessions. And it's interesting to note that some, such as Apple or BMW or Starbucks, they had a tough year in 2009. But then they quickly rebounded the following year, and they enjoyed growth rates going forward that actually exceeded the pre-recession levels. Others, like Walmart, Netflix, and even Lululemon, as well as a whole industry that was birthed out of the previous recession, the craft beer industry, they all had sales spikes within weeks of the recession's peak. They actually enjoyed better growth in the recession in 2009 than they did the following year. So all of these brands whom we consider masters of audience engagement and have earned a level of cult-like affinity fully recovered from the recession and emerged both bigger and better positioned than they were before. One category that we're watching very closely is home sales. So while social distancing has certainly crippled that industry in the spring, we'd argue that homeowners have never been more aware of the deficiencies of their house because we've been isolated in them for months. So I'm sure that many people have created a brand new wish list of things that they want from a new house. And given lower interest rates, it will make it very attractive to either upgrade or downsize depending on your newly assessed needs. Of course, through all of this, the caveat is that tens of millions of people are recently unemployed, and that will certainly temper their enthusiasm for big ticket prices. But assuming jobs do come back quickly, many brands could expect to have a great back half of the year or a tremendous 2021. What I advise here is that brand leaders in the Recoup quadrant get really creative about how to expand their peak capacity. Some should use this time to aggressively pursue the acquisition of competitive assets, many of which are now distressed and are favorably priced. Others should explore mutually beneficial partnerships or strategic alliances, and still others should go on a hiring spree and capitalize on all of the amazing talent that has been displaced and is now seeking work. You're going to need an all-hands-on-deck approach in order to accommodate this tidal wave of demand that could be heading your way. Now, in the bottom left-hand quadrant is the resign group. Resign is a nicer word than quit because most business leaders don't want to feel like they're quitters. But choosing to hang up your cleats and to retire from the game is oftentimes a wise and even a noble decision. We celebrate that type of behavior in sports and in entertainment, and we should all honor a graceful exit from business as well. Many startups and many small business owners struggled to ever really achieve product market fit before Corona. Other firms were unable to keep up with the pace of change or new competitive pressures. And still others made a really good go of it for decades, but the owners have simply lost their spark. So for these types of businesses, this recession is going to be the proverbial nail in their company's coffin. Rather than try to summon the willpower to fight through this, simply declare your business a Corona casualty. There is no shame in that. And if you do, you will not be alone. In fact, a recent Canadian survey of 9,700 small business owners indicated that 1/3 said they are unlikely to reopen. Now, one industry that we're watching very closely in this quadrant is post-secondary education. I anticipate a fairly dramatic culling among liberal arts colleges and small universities. Academia has been preying on the hopes and dreams of the struggling middle class for years. But tuition expenses have far exceeded inflation, and the ROI of a college degree from a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 school has become very questionable. We already saw a sustained drop in applications at four-year universities in 2019, and dozens of institutions have already gone under the past 48 months. Because there remains so much uncertainty about the ability for students to even return to campuses this fall, we're anticipating a huge spike in gap year students, kids who are going to opt out of video conference room classes and instead take a year off. And that loss of income from that tuition is going to be way too great for many floundering programs to digest. And what's going to become even more difficult to overcome is if cult brand schools like Harvard or Stanford, Northwestern, and MIT, if they start offering remote learning options to more people at a lower cost, doing so will allow them to steal students from less prestigious programs, and we'll see a huge consolidation where there will be a few dozen or so institutions that are big winners, and 100 or more schools that are big losers. Another category that we're watching very closely in this quadrant is commercial real estate. The biggest pleasant surprise from this whole pandemic, aside from how much guilty pleasure Joe Exotic has brought into our lives, is that white-collar employers have learned that white-collar employees can be very productive from home. That epiphany is bad news for commercial landlords. Thanks to improving technology and new cultural norms, people can now avoid soul-sucking commutes and enjoy a greater work-life balance. We believe the traditional 9-to-5 job is an endangered species, and companies must now rethink large office space investments. I do see a very bright future for co-working spaces, despite how badly Adam Newman has botched WeWork. But employees will crave occasional face-to-face coworker interaction. And some people I know will look for excuses to shower and change out of the same ragged college sweatshirt that they wear 4 days a week, even though their wife hates it. But I digress. Expect enlightened new work-from-home policies to reduce the demands on commercial buildings and to make those very unattractive assets for the landlords who own them. There are a host of other businesses in this quadrant, businesses like movie theaters and retailers, restaurants and nonprofit charities, businesses that will simply cease to exist when all is said and done. Their fixed costs are too high, they have poor customer advocacy, and there's simply too much undifferentiated choice that will cull the herd, and the supply will adjust to meet the reduced demand. My suggestion for owners in this quadrant is to take their ball and go home. It was fun while it lasted, but consider that retail closures increased 60% from 2018 to 2019, and already here in Q1, retail pundits are suggesting 15,000 more stores will close this year. Things are going to get worse before they get better. So don't pour your blood, your sweat, and your tears into a dying concept. Save your energy for a new or a different endeavor with better odds of success. All right, finally, in this last quadrant is Reinvent. Personally, I'm most excited about the brands that refuse to let a good crisis go to waste and instead decide to jump into the driver's seat and do something awesome. Prior to COVID-19, many companies were toying with alternative revenue streams and ways to diversify their offerings. But they were too polite in how they dealt with legacy systems or departments that were producing only modest revenue. Their temperance weakened their organization's ability to more aggressively pursue change. But every C-suite now has the excuse they need to more wholeheartedly forsake their old ways and sprint towards new ones. Let me give you a few examples. I know of a home maintenance company that is replacing costly in-person home audits with virtual assessments using the two-way camera on a homeowner's smartphone. This is just a better idea regardless of social distancing rules, because it now allows a team of inspectors to take many more video calls rather than driving around town all day with a costly fleet of vehicles. What was once a novel idea will become their core service offering, and for a fraction of the price for the end user and at a much higher margin for the brand. I also know several fast food and casual dining chains that are repurposing locations that have been underperforming for years. They're converting these locations into new grab-and-go destinations or just permanent kitchens exclusively reserved for delivery services, offering modified menus that are better suited for home dining. I know of a large retail bank that was slowly shuttering poorly utilized retail branches that is now much more motivated to pour resources into an idea that they've been incubating for years, involving a mobile-only brand and a whole suite of new digital products and services. I know of an NHL hockey club who is testing ways to energize their fan base and is now amplifying their offerings digitally to allow more fans more ways to not only interact with the brand and its players, but with each other as fans, things that they can do beyond attending a live game. And finally, I know of a tech company that has been debating internally for years the value of their hardware business versus starting a whole new business model offering productivity software and training. They have finally gotten the motivation that they need to transform their brand into an e-learning company. You know, they say that necessity is the mother of all invention, and many business leaders simply needed a little nudge to become a little bit more creative and a little bit more courageous. Admittedly, this pandemic was a lot more of an unwelcomed shove than a nudge, but it has helped to wake people up and to force their hands and to more deliberately pursue new ways to get new skills and to pursue those with greater enthusiasm as quickly as possible. I recommend that brand leaders in this quadrant use some outside help. Get some people who haven't been mired in all that cultural baggage that has historically hampered your ability to change. Also, a fresh set of eyes can always provide greater objectivity and lend valuable experience to help reduce the number of mistakes that you make as you and your people start running with scissors.